Her biography is marked by family intrigue, infanticide, bloody wars, enslavement, cannibalism, and revenge. The life of the Queen of Ndongo and Matamba, Njinga Mbandi. Queen Victoria, Frederick the Great, or Alexander II of Russia should have taken lessons in diplomacy and strategic warfare from her. But unlike these three, Njinga is sadly little known. The remarkable ruler managed to defend herself and her people for decades against the colonizers' occupation. The brilliant leader formed clever alliances, planned her strategies for the long term, and won the trust of her people against all odds by going into battle with them herself on the front line. Hardly anyone would have guessed this at her birth in 1583, except perhaps her father, for Njinga quickly became his favorite child. He saw greatness in her, and after he ascended the throne of Ndongo and became Ngola, which means king and is where the country's name Angola comes from, Njinga was only 10 years old. By then, he was already including her in the leadership business. She also received military training, and her favorite weapon, being the royal battle axe, later became her trademark. A girl, especially the child of a concubine, was out of the question for the succession, but it became apparent early on that she outshined her brothers in terms of political leadership, negotiation skills, and fighting talent. Her father, the new king, inherited a country in 1593 that had already been afflicted for decades by the slave trade of the Portuguese colonizers. To destroy the rebellious people, the Portuguese formed an alliance with the unscrupulous mercenary Imbangala people. The Portuguese wanted slaves, the Imbangala wanted territory of Ndongo. The Imbangala are notorious for their brutal warfare and combat training. The fighters have their cutting teeth extracted as a sign of bravery, eat human flesh, although I don't know if that still works as well without cutting teeth, kill their newborns to rob other tribes of their boys and raise them to be ruthless soldiers and live on their bounty alone. The Imbangala were therefore very similar to the Spartans in their cruelty. Cowardice was forbidden, and every warrior had to wear a collar that was only removed when you had killed someone. And with them, the Portuguese allied themselves to enslave the kingdom of Ndongo and Njinga's family. Together they conquered large parts of Ndongo and devastated the country. Njinga's father was subsequently ambushed and murdered by his own men in 1617. The king had many sons, both legitimate and by concubines, so it was now unclear who should succeed to the throne. Normally, all suitable candidates would have now had to undergo a selection process, but Njinga's brother, Mbandi, took advantage of the turmoil of the war situation, and before all the candidates could arrive in the capital, he already declared himself the next king. As his first official act, he ordered the assassination of all possible competitors, like all close male relatives. Njinga, his own sister, had just given birth to a baby boy. He too was now killed. To avoid more competitors, Mbandi ordered the forced sterilization with boiling oil of his sisters Njinga, Kambu, and Fungi. Njinga was to remain childless all her life, and she never forgot what her brother did to her and her sisters. She fled from Ndongo to the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. The Portuguese now increasingly exploit the unstable situation in Ndongo and sent their human hunters and the mercenaries of the Imbangala into the kingdom. As a result, the capital is looted and burned, and the royal family has to flee. In the following years, around 50,000 inhabitants are enslaved by the Portuguese. Mbandi has no choice but to ask the Portuguese for peace. He knows that his sister Njinga is a better diplomat and asks her to go to Luanda to negotiate peace with the Portuguese. Njinga is now 39 years old. She is estranged from her brother and she has never forgiven him for killing her son. Yet she agrees to his request. She sees her chance has come to prove herself at the political banquet and take the lead from her brother. The Portuguese have no idea what a charismatic personality they will now have to deal with, but Njinga gives them a taste of her tactical skills during her first visit to the Portuguese governor Sousa in 1622. Sousa wants to play power games to clarify the hierarchies right at the beginning, and so he does not offer her a chair, but expects Njinga to kneel on the carpet in front of him. Njinga is not intimidated by this. She orders a servant to kneel on all fours so that she can sit on her back and look the governor directly in his eyes. Sousa is impressed and realizes that he is dealing with an equal tactician. She successfully leads the peace negotiations. As a compromise for the withdrawal of the Imbangala troops from Ndongo promised by the Portuguese, Njinga has herself baptized a Catholic. But the word of a colonizer is worth shit, and so the Portuguese do not keep their promise. The Imbangala continue to ravage the land of the Ndongo. In 1624, King Mbandi takes his own life. Some claim that Njinga poisoned her brother, but he had long since chosen her as his successor. However, she still wanted revenge for the murder of her son, and so she had her brother's son killed as her first official act as a queen. To secure her power and to build up a dynasty of queens, she had almost the entire entire royal family killed, except for her 2 sisters. She tries to bring the severely weakened empire back to new power, and so she promises the slaves in Portuguese Luanda freedom and protection if they come to Ndongo and resist the colonial rulers. With this, Njinga has now created a powerful enemy. A series of battles follow between the Portuguese and Ndongo, who use guerrilla tactics against the super enemy, with the queen herself fighting in the front line with her battle axe. But the Portuguese are too powerful, and a bitter defeat for Njinga follows. The colonial rulers throw the queen off her throne and kidnap her 2 sisters. Njinga swears that she will not rest until she has freed her sisters. But Njinga also has to escape first. Of all people, she seeks shelter with the Imbangala, exactly, the cannibals without the cutting teeth. Their leader Kazanje takes her in on one condition: she is to become his wife and adopt the traditions of the Imbangala. She wants to free her sisters and reclaim her kingdom at all costs, so she agrees. Now she is introduced to the rights of the cannibal mercenaries and even trained to become one of their warriors. Among the Imbangala, origin and hierarchies mattered little. It was all about skill, mastery of weapons and courage on the battlefield. And so there was no bonus for the exiled queen of Ndongo. No, Njinga also had to face the examinations and the trainings. After a year of relentless practice, she was indeed so well trained that she became an Imbangala leader herself and set up her own training camp. She invades the kingdom of Matamba with her troops of Imbangala soldiers. After the victory, she proclaimed herself Queen of Matamba. From here, she could now plan her campaign of revenge against the Portuguese to free Ndongo and her sisters. At least that was the plan. But besides Matamba and her Imbangala soldiers, she needs other allies for this. She sees her chance when the Dutch arrive in Central Africa and forms an alliance with them against the Portuguese. She expands the Matamba Empire by making it the central trading point for captured people. In some years, she sells more than 13,000 unfree people. She is able to contact her sister Fungi, who acts as a spy for her in the Portuguese ranks. The plan seems to work, but then everything turns out entirely unexpected. In 1647, Fungi is exposed and the Portuguese have her drowned in retaliation. Then comes the next punch. Her allies, the Dutch, have to withdraw from Central Africa and surrender to the Portuguese. Njinga is suddenly left without an ally. Njinga is now in her mid-60s and must once again think of a strategy to secure independence for her people and free her other sister, Kambu. She negotiates a peace treaty with the Portuguese. In the process, she renounces the Imbangala rights and converts to Christianity. Again, she writes letters to the Pope personally. The idea behind it, if the inhabitants of her kingdom convert to Christianity and the Pope recognizes her, there will no longer be any official reason for the Portuguese to conquer her people. In fact, the plan works. And finally, in 1656, Njinga is now 74 years old and has not seen her sister since her abduction 27 years ago. The sisters can finally reunite in each other's arms. She now has her sister back, the promise from the Pope to be an ordained queen of Christianity, and a peace treaty with the Portuguese. Now she goes about her part of the deal and sets about Christianizing her people. At the age of 81, Njinga dies, leaving the kingdom to her sister, and as long as she lives, unfortunately only for another 3 years, the peace lasts. After the death of her sister, civil war breaks out in Matamba. After years of changing rulers, a queen reigned again over more than 40 years and was also succeeded by women. Ndongo remains under Portuguese control, and Matamba is eventually incorporated into Portuguese Angola in the 1890s. In 1975, over 400 years after being colonized, Angola is finally free from Portuguese rule. In the process, Njinga was also thought of as a national symbol of resistance. Few rulers in the world history can match the strategic brilliance, clever warfare, and diplomatic skills of Queen Njinga. And yet, she is hardly mentioned in the canon of the greats. Yet, we remember her today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it inspired you. If you're interested in more fascinating characters from African history, click here.